Asian Americans are poised to play a pivotal role in the 2020 presidential election. According to the Pew Research Center, the demographic is the fastest growing racial or ethnic group in the U.S. electorate. More than 11 million Asian Americans are eligible to vote this year. They'll make up nearly 5% of the nation's electorate. For more, I want to bring in Neil Ruiz. He's the Associate Director of the Global Migration and Demography Research at the Pew Center. And he joins me now. So Neil, tell me, over the last 20 years, the number of Asian Americans eligible to vote has nearly doubled. And as you can see, looking at this that we're putting up right now, the Hispanic electorate grew at a similar rate, but the African American and white electorate grew far more slowly. What accounts for this increase among Asian Americans?
Hi, Reena. Thank you so much for having me. For Asian Americans, really, it's a story of immigration. There are 2/3 of all the 11 million Asian Americans that are eligible to vote were born abroad, immigrated to the United States, and became naturalized citizens. So really, this rise of Asian Americans who are eligible to vote is really a story of immigration.
It's incredible you say it's a story of immigration. Asian Americans traditionally are prone to register as independents. And according to the Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders Data Center, there was a 2018 survey that found 38% actually do not identify with the party. They tend to cast their votes independent. Why is that the case, especially since you've got prominent politicians, whether you're looking at the Democratic or Republican side, but on the Republican side, Bobby Jindal of Louisiana, Nikki Haley of South Carolina, they've come up in the Republican Party in recent years. What do you make of this fact that there are so many independents?
So we have to understand that Asian American eligible voters are really a diverse group. There are many origins that make up Asian Americans: Chinese, Indian, Filipino, Vietnamese. And within this diversity, there are diversity of political views. So those who are, for example, Vietnamese Americans tend to actually be Republican, whereas those who are Indian American voters, they actually tend to be more Democratic. So you see that there's this diversity, and then you have those independent voters also who are in the middle. So I would say that the Asian American vote is really a diversity of various origins.
Hillary Clinton back, in 16, there was nearly 80% of the Asian vote went for her. That's significant. That's compared to 18% for what went for President Trump. Why do you think that's the case? And what do you project based on what you've seen at Pew? Do you expect that to be the same narrative come November for the presumptive Democratic nominee, Joe Biden?
So I think that this year is an unprecedented year. We are going through a pandemic, so we just don't know, I think, in terms of what will happen in this 2020 elections. But what I can tell you is that voter turnout rate was really high during the midterm elections for many racial and ethnic groups, especially Asian Americans. Just to give you an example, Asian Americans had a 40% increase of voting for the midterm elections back in 2018. And so we have yet to see if that will happen during the 2020 presidential elections, given the pandemic and all the various issues that still will be evolving over the campaign election season.
Neil, based on your research at Pew, was there anything that surprised you about the Asian American voting bloc?
What's interesting about Asian Americans is that as a whole, they're the highest in terms of education. 50% have a bachelor's degree or above. You also have the highest income, annual household income among Asian Americans, about $105,000 a year. But then when it comes to English proficiency, they're the lowest among all the Asian racial and ethnic groups, just at 70%, whereas Hispanics have 80% are English proficient, and whites and blacks are about well over 90%. So it's actually a very interesting electorate, given the high income, high education, but also lower English proficiency compared to other racial and ethnic groups.
That's fascinating. I had no idea about that. I'm curious, though, Neil, do you have a sense of how both the Republican and Democratic Party might try to court these Asian American voters?
So I think that that's, well, again, because of this pandemic, it's going to be very interesting to see how it's not going to be a traditional campaign. But what I can tell you is that based on pre-COVID-19 surveys, we know that there are certain issues that Asian Americans care about. According to AAPI data, about majority of Asian Americans actually care about stricter gun laws. They also cared about giving access to health care regardless of immigration status, higher than other racial and ethnic groups.